The story begins with a group of high school students, wearing strange costumes, stood before the locked front door. Their way was cleared when one of the students, Isaiah, quickly typed in the correct password, and the group quietly went inside. They began to look around, making it seem like they were there to steal things, but their real reason for being there was revealed when Isaiah found an electric wire to power the lights for a party. Yet, before the teens could start dancing, the house suddenly went dark. They were a little scared but stayed calm and turned on their phone flashlights. Isaiah once again led the way, a tense look on his face. He moved slowly and carefully toward the basement to find the circuit breaker. In the dim light, a pale face suddenly jumped out from the shadows. He was so startled he almost fell, but he quickly saw it was only a human-like mask. Meanwhile, his friends waiting upstairs were alarmed when the basement door slammed shut. They desperately tried to open it but couldn't. As the group grew more confused, the door was suddenly thrown open with great force. The students screamed in terror, only to find their friend Isaiah laughing at them. He was playing a prank. He even took a picture of his friends' scared faces. At that moment, the lights suddenly came back on. The young friends, not worried about the strange events, continued with their fun costume party. What Isaiah and his group did not realize was that their presence had made them an attractive target for an evil spirit that had been trapped inside the old mansion for many years. Many years before, a young man had lived in this mansion by himself. One night, while he was in the basement using a camera to photograph his work, the doorbell rang. When he went to open the door, however, no one was there. Just as he turned away, the doorbell rang again. Fear began to show on his face, and he grew even more scared when the chandelier in the house suddenly crashed to the floor. In a panic, he grabbed a candle and ran to the basement, locking the door behind him. In his rush, he tripped and fell down the stairs. The candle fell from his hand, and the basement burst into flames. The fire burned fiercely, like a roaring monster. The story jumps forward 35 years. The current owner, a young man named Brat, is a relative of Harold, the man who died in the fire. He looked very happy because after the fire, Harold's parents had also disappeared mysteriously, leaving Brat to inherit the house. His lawyer had told him a few days before, and he had already hired a repairman to fix up the property and make it bigger. As Brat looked around, he decided to check the basement, but the repairman told him the wooden door was jammed. The repairman suggested he just leave it, but Brat disagreed. He immediately took a crowbar and tried to force the door open. He used too much force and cut his hand, so the repairman had to take him to the hospital for stitches. The two left, not knowing that the blood on the floor was slowly gathering and moving toward the door handle. The basement door then swung open by itself, and a cold wind swept through the coastal town, signaling that its peaceful days were over. That evening, Isaiah, who was the repairman's son, broke into the villa with his friends. They were immediately faced with mysterious events that frightened them. However, the young people ignored these things as they were busy welcoming guests to their party. Before the party could really start, the host, Brat, unexpectedly stormed in. He gave them a serious warning that if they didn't leave right away, he would call the police. The group of fun-loving teens quickly ran off. In her rush, Isaiah's best friend, Allison, ran in a panic and got lost in a dark forest. She saw a figure standing silently in the distance and called out, but got no answer. Allison chose to go in a different direction, only to find the same figure in front of her again. She screamed in terror and spun around to run, but crashed right into the person. Suddenly, the figure shrieked as its whole body was covered in flames. Allison was so terrified that she stumbled and fell down a hill. Just then, a strong hand reached out to her. To her relief, it was Isaiah. Early the next morning, Isaiah looked at the photos he had taken the day before. He was surprised to find one showing his friend Margot standing in a hallway, holding a Snickers bar. As he looked at it, a figure appeared in the real hallway. Right after, a package of nutcrackers dropped from a nearby vending machine. Margot, not suspecting anything, picked them up and began to eat. A moment later, she couldn't breathe and collapsed. Although she soon recovered, Isaiah did not feel relieved because the look on Margot's face as she fainted was the same as in the photograph. He rushed to tell his friend what he had discovered, but when he pulled out the picture, it had, for some reason, turned completely black. Margot, thinking Isaiah was joking, angrily grabbed the camera and took a picture of him. The boy was horrified to see that the photo showed him in a football uniform, lying injured on the ground. Isaiah was now certain that the camera he had found was cursed. He tried to destroy it by smashing it with a hammer and then burning both the photos and the camera. He was especially worried because he had a big football game that night. Isaiah believed that destroying the camera had broken the curse, but he was shocked to find it in perfect condition inside his locker. He started to panic. His teammates then dragged him onto the field. As the game began, he tried to ask for a substitute, but it was too late. Looking around wildly, Isaiah saw the referee's face burst into flames. The field itself seemed to be on fire. The football became stuck to his hand and he couldn't get it off. He could only hold the ball and run wildly across the field. The crowd was confused, except for one woman who seemed to understand what was happening. She stood up and yelled for the game to be stopped. On the field, the fiery monster finally caught up to Isaiah, and he was thrown hard to the ground. His parents rushed to his side. Isaiah's arm was badly broken, but thankfully, his life was not in danger, though it would take at least 6 months for him to recover. The woman who had sensed the danger approached Isaiah's father, Ben, outside the hospital room. She said with a serious tone that he was back to get revenge on all of them, and Isaiah's injury was only the beginning. At the same time, back at the old house, Brat heard a noise outside. When he went to look, he was faced with the sight of Harold, the villa's former owner who was thought to have died in the fire, standing before him. Brat watched as the figure turned into smoke and shot right into his mouth. After this, Brat seemed to become someone else, and a strange, knowing smile spread across his face. No one could understand what the townspeople had done to attract such a scary and powerful being. The woman's warning was right. Isaiah's injury was just the start. The cursed camera was not the only strange object in the old villa. The story goes back to the night of the party, where Isaiah's shy classmate, Isabella, had hoped to get noticed. She had ordered a unique dress days before for the party. Unfortunately, that night, Isabella failed to get the attention she wanted. Feeling sad, she noticed the basement door was open and curiously went down. Her eyes were immediately drawn to the mask lying on the floor. The moment she put it on, Isabella felt a rush of confidence. She walked through the party with a new sense of style and instantly became the center of attention. When she got home, she sadly took off the mask. The feeling had been so exciting that she became fascinated by it. From that day on, Isabella loved the feeling of hiding behind the mask, even bringing it with her to school. A few days later, a partly recovered Isaiah returned to school. The first thing he did was check his locker for the camera, but it was empty. He began to wonder if the whole thing had just been in his head. Lost in thought, Isaiah went to the sports field, where he saw Isabella flying a drone to get video from above. He ran over and asked if she had filmed his game. As a member of the school's camera crew, filming the game was her job. Soon after, Isabella found the video on her computer. Strangely, the video only showed Isaiah running around the field with nothing unusual happening. Just as Isabella left the room, she saw a classmate named Lucas jump from the roof while holding her drone. The drone was destroyed, but Lucas was luckily not hurt. At first, the teacher suggested that a simple apology from Lucas would be enough. Isabella reluctantly agreed, but the mask in her pocket seemed to whisper, "Don't forgive so easily." In that moment, she felt as if she had become a different person. She coldly demanded he pay for it. The teacher agreed this was fair, and the classmate offered to pay over time. But the mask spoke again, and Isabella's expression grew mean. She yelled at her friend, saying he would never be able to pay off the debt. She also accused the teacher of being unfair. A moment later, Isabella seemed to return to normal, confused as to how she, who was always so quiet, could have acted so fierce. When she got home, Isabella was scolded by her mother because the drone was a tool her father used for work. Isabella's attempts to explain that it wasn't her fault were ignored, and her mother grounded her for a day, taking away her phone and computer. That night, her younger brother, Jack, snuck his phone into her room to show her a video. It showed that the classmate who broke the drone felt no guilt and had even posted a video of it online to get views. Angry, she kicked her brother out of the room. At that moment, the mask spoke, offering to help. Later, the classmate was skateboarding in the schoolyard when a masked figure came out of the darkness. The figure coolly threw the skateboard to the ground and shattered it with a single powerful punch. As the figure slowly took off its hood, the mask began to blend into the skin of its face, creating a terrifying, demonic look. Luckily, Isaiah arrived just in time, causing the strange creature to stand up in fear and run away. Isabella's younger brother, Jack, was reading when he heard a strange noise from downstairs. He went to check and was horrified to find a bald man in a mask sneaking into their house. Jack tried to call his sister for help, but then he heard the phone ringing from the masked man's pocket. He couldn't believe this could be his gentle, kind sister. Jack ran in a panic until he was trapped in a warehouse. Desperate, he screamed Isabella's name. The bald monster's body trembled, and it shouted, "Get lost!" before using its strength to tear the mask off. Filled with fear and horror, Isabella and her brother decided they had to get rid of the strange mask. Also, on the night of the party, another student named James had a strange experience. After a fall, the ticking of a large clock filled her ears, making her feel dizzy. When the other students moved to the party room, James tried to talk to a boy she had a crush on, only to find out he was a sports fan and they had nothing in common. Watching him walk away, a sad James decided to go home early. But as she tried to leave, she was blocked by an invisible wall. She found herself back in the basement next to the large clock, with her friend telling everyone to join the party. James realized she must be in a time loop. To check her theory, she rushed out of the living room, only to hear the ticking sound again as everything reset to the same moment. She began to panic, trying over and over to escape, even through a window, but each try pulled her back to the time just before the party. After many repeats, James decided to use the loop to her advantage. She asked her crush about his favorite athletes and then used the loop's reset time to look up information online. When the loop began again, she used this knowledge to talk to him, quickly winning his affection. He even asked her to go for a walk. At this point, she jammed the gears of the large clock. When its hands stopped moving, she was suddenly able to leave the room, breaking the time loop. The next morning, however, as James got ready to leave her house, she was met by another version of herself. This copy revealed a horrifying truth. Every time James had looped back in time, she had accidentally created a copy of herself. Panicked, she ran out the door, only to find a line of other copies waiting for her. She was then knocked out. When the bag over her head was removed, James found herself in an abandoned mine. One of the clones kicked her hard, sending her falling down the mine shaft. Meanwhile, Brat, who was now possessed by Harold's spirit, began to wake up, his mind feeling heavy and dizzy. He rushed to school, finding that he sometimes couldn't control his own arms and legs. When he went to the bathroom to wash his face, he saw Harold's reflection staring back from the mirror. Brat's body trembled, and a ghostly smile crossed his face, showing that the evil spirit had completely taken control of him. From that day on, the once gentle man began to act very strangely. At the same time, Isabella, now knowing that the mask could control people, decided with her younger brother to throw it into a river. But as soon as they left, Brat came out from the nearby bushes. When he returned to the old house, he seemed to have lost all human feeling. The human mask was taken from the river, and the cursed camera also reappeared. All of this made Brat feel as though he had been reborn. That afternoon, he went to a fast food restaurant where the owner was Nora, the same woman who had noticed something was wrong on the soccer field. When she overheard Brat mention his home address, she was shocked. She asked if he had experienced anything strange, but Brat calmly replied that everything was normal. Nora said nothing more and turned to get his food from the microwave. When she turned back, Brat was gone, only to reappear standing right behind her. His strange behavior nearly made Nora scream and confirmed her suspicions. That night, she went to Isaiah's house, planning to ask him questions, but Ben, his father, stopped her. He called his son inside and warned Nora not to bother him with her superstitions. Nora had to leave. On her way, she ran into Margot and slipped a photo into her hand, asking her to give it to Isaiah. As soon as Isaiah saw it, he recognized the person in the picture as the referee from the game. Margot was doubtful, as her own search had identified the man in the photo as Harold, the former owner of the burned-out house. They began to wonder if all the recent strange events were connected to him. Margot wanted to ask Nora for more information, but Nora was a step ahead. The next morning, she gathered a group of adults, including Isaiah's father, James's clone mother, and Isabella's mother. Nora insisted that an evil force was invading their town and hurting their children, but the other parents said her claims were nonsense. While they argued, Isabella and a version of James started playing pool in the living room. Suddenly, James was hit by a ball and shattered into a liquid. Isabella screamed in terror. Everyone ran in to see James standing there, completely fine, claiming it was just a joke. The parents went home, but Isabella was still sure she had seen what she saw. The next morning, Isaiah and Margot visited James to talk about the house fire. They found that she seemed to be a completely different person, making fun of them during their conversation. Isaiah became very annoyed. Suddenly, Isabella rushed in and smashed James, who once again turned into liquid. She told Isaiah and Margot to calm down and explained what she had found. The three of them sat down to figure out the connections between the mask, the camera, and James's change. They decided it all led back to the house fire. They decided to ask Nora for answers, but she avoided them, as she had promised their parents she wouldn't talk about the house again. With no other options, the group of teens decided to act on their own. Their first goal was to rescue the real James. The following morning, they watched James's house. When they saw her leave in a hurry, they secretly followed her car to an abandoned mine. Isaiah and his two friends carefully snuck inside. As they entered the basement, the mine's lights suddenly turned on, and a truck filled with rocks came rushing toward them. The group turned to run but found their exit blocked by James's father. Before they could understand what was happening, another James appeared. Isaiah didn't hesitate and chased this new James into an open area. To his shock, yet another James crawled out from a nearby tunnel. Everyone was stunned by the identical people, who all started accusing each other of being fakes. Acting on instinct, Isaiah grabbed a piece of wood and hit the nearest James. Another James immediately declared that he wasn't real either. Just as Isaiah yelled for everyone to run, a sack was thrown over his head, and he was tossed into a different mine shaft. There, he was surprised to find another James, the real one, trapped with him. Isaiah quickly grabbed a rock and hit the other person's head to make sure it was him. Once they were sure it was the real James, they They told him about all the recent events. However, their most important task was figuring out how to get out of there. Just then, a large stone was moved aside. It turned out that Isabella and Margot had followed the noise to find them. The moment the friends got out of the cave, the clones immediately chased them. James and Isaiah decided to act as a distraction to lead the clones away, but they didn't expect to run into a dead end. With nowhere to run, their only choice was to fight to the end. Even though there were many clones, they had a key weakness. A hit to the head would make them instantly shatter. After a tough fight, James and Isaiah managed to get rid of every last clone. Sometime after, the friends gathered at a fast food place to get food for James, who had been starving for days. After going through so many strange events, one question was on everyone's mind. Who was Harold, the person from the burning house? Yet, the adults who knew what was going on stayed completely silent. Margot chose to call her mother, who worked in the city. As soon as she heard Harold's name, her mother seriously warned her to stay put and said she would be coming back to town soon. After ending the call, she took out a cardboard box from her closet. A photograph of Harold was inside. It seemed the two of them had an important connection. At the same time, a different James clone arrived in the basement of the old house. It told Brat that it had failed to find the item he needed. Brat, in a fit of rage, instantly smashed the clone, which turned into liquid. This showed that the James clones were not all gone, but what Brat was looking for remained a mystery. Lucas, the son of the shop owner, had been a big fan of extreme sports, but ever since his father, a professional motorcycle racer, died in an accident, Lucas had lost the courage to push himself. Still, since he was a child, he had dreamed of being an explorer just like his father. One day, while Lucas was wiping down tables, a strange ball unexpectedly rolled out from his father's things. He found it interesting and decided to take it with him. As he was leaving the warehouse, Lucas happened to see his mother being intimate with a school teacher. He acted on instinct and quickly pulled out his camera to record the moment. When he got to school, the ball at Lucas's waist was spotted by Brat. Brat felt a strong urge to touch it, but Lucas quickly moved away. In the mirror's reflection, a demonic shadow could be seen. Lucas had no idea that a demon was now targeting him. Lucas hurried to find his classmate Margot, telling her he had something important to show her. They both went to Lucas's house. The moment the video began to play, Margot nearly collapsed, as the man in the video was her own father. Lucas was able to accept the situation since his father was already dead. Margot's situation was different. Her mother was still alive. She was heartbroken to learn her father could do such a thing. To try and cheer up his friend, Lucas suddenly pulled a worm from a fish tank, one he had collected from the old house during the party. Lucas dangled the worm in front of Margot, but it unexpectedly dropped right into his own mouth. She was horrified, but Lucas just shook his head, saying he was fine. From that point on, however, Lucas's life was changed forever. Foods he once loved now tasted like nothing. Instead, he started wanting to dig through trash to find things to eat. One time, he fell down a flight of stairs but felt no pain. It was like he had unlocked a new feeling. Lucas then purposely used a cupboard door to cut off his own finger. He felt nothing, and the wound immediately healed itself. Lucas started to feel a rush of excitement. This strange new ability meant he could try all the things he had been too scared to try before. Soon after, Lucas rode his motorcycle right off the school's roof. Margot's father rushed over, yelling at him for damaging the bike. Lucas simply smiled and went on to reveal the secret relationship between the teacher and his own mother. Hearing this, the teacher was speechless. Margot quickly ran to his side, pointing out that his shoulder was injured. He just rotated his shoulder and the injury healed. As Lucas lowered his collar, Margot noticed long, wriggling creatures moving under her friend's skin. He seemed completely unworried, saying that this was just the beginning. His real goal was to overcome death itself. Margot was horrified to hear this. She went straight to Lucas's mother, Nora. Margot explained that Lucas was possessed by some evil being and was planning to do something dangerous. Nora paused, realizing she knew exactly where her son was going. It turned out that Lucas's father had died while trying a flying motorcycle jump over a dangerous slope. Now that Lucas had the ability to feel no pain, he saw it as his chance to finish his father's unfinished stunt. He was ready to ride down the slope. Nora and Margot reached him just in time. His mother bravely stood in front of her son, begging Lucas not to be foolish. She explained that his father hadn't chosen that slope to test his limits, but because he had lost the will to live. Lucas was stunned and couldn't believe what he was hearing. Nora added that his father had left a suicide note before his death. She hid it because she didn't want to ruin the perfect image of his father that Lucas had in his heart. Lucas's confidence completely fell apart. He dropped to his knees, curling into a ball. Suddenly, a mass of earthworms poured from his mouth. Luckily, he was still thinking clearly. Lucas understood that he had been carelessly risking his own life. Right at that emotional moment between mother and son, the ground started to tremble. Countless worms came together, forming a giant monster. Lucas cursed under his breath, telling his mother and Margot to run immediately. Lucas knew the monster was after him, so he didn't hesitate to start his motorcycle and lead it away. The monster chased him, but Lucas rode the bike like a professional. He soon made it to the main road at the bottom of the mountain. The monster, however, moved faster by traveling underwater. Lucas sped ahead to lead it. After this, the group reached a local sawmill. They believed they would be safe hiding in the warehouse, but soon the door began to groan under great pressure. Lucas quickly told his mother to turn on the electric saw. He kept leading the monster in circles. The moment the gears began to turn, Lucas jumped from his motorcycle. The monster, unable to stop in time, plunged directly into the spinning saw blade. A large amount of reddish-brown liquid gushed out. They had finally defeated the terrifying monster. Still, they had caused a big disturbance, so Margot and Lucas decided to leave first. Nora stayed behind to explain to the police. She thought for a while before deciding to tell the truth. Because of this, she wasn't sent to jail but was instead sent to the mental ward of H Hospital, a place for people who were mentally unstable. Nora's mental health got steadily worse. She began seeing Harold, the dead man, with her own eyes. Nora started to question if she was going crazy. Margot's father, even though he had cheated, brought Lucas home to look after him. That very afternoon, however, his wife, Sarah, unexpectedly returned from her trip. Lucas, being carefree, didn't notice the heavy and unusually quiet feeling in the home. While Margot's father was getting some wine, Margot took the chance to ask her mother about Harold, but her mother's expression turned serious. She said it was a complicated issue and not something a girl should get involved in. It was clear she had no plans to tell the truth. She then left in anger. Margot had no choice but to tell her friends this bad news. They all looked worried, as their parents had all been classmates of Harold. What could have happened that would make all the adults so determined to keep it a secret? Just as the group felt lost and unsure what to do, back in the burning house, Brat was getting instructions from Harold's spirit. He quickly picked up the old notebook from the table. Sarah heard about Nora's situation and immediately went to visit her. Nora looked incredibly tired and worn out. She repeated her claim of seeing Harold, saying he was controlling monsters to get revenge on their children. These claims sounded unbelievable, yet Sarah chose to believe Nora. She rushed to find Isabella's mother and accused her of giving Nora sleeping pills. At this point, Isabella's mother showed her true colors. She claimed Nora had broken her promise by telling the police about Harold. She insisted Nora had to stay quiet or they would all lose everything they had. Sarah left the office, feeling sad. She unexpectedly ran into her husband in the hallway. He looked awkward and embarrassed. After hesitating for a moment, he finally admitted that he was in love with Nora. He explained this by saying Sarah had left town years ago for no clear reason. While they were legally married, they had basically been separated for a long time. Sarah frowned, looking as if she wanted to speak, but she couldn't share her reason for leaving town with anyone. In the end, she had no choice but to accept the sad reality of the situation. Still, Sarah needed to make sure her daughter was safe. She went to the mental hospital to see Nora, warning her to give up any hope. The medicine would only make Nora's mental state worse, making it almost impossible for her to be released. At this point, perhaps they were the only two who could protect their children. Nora listened, and with the nurse there, she pretended to take the medicine. However, the moment the nurse turned away, she spat it out. At the same time, an old notebook was given to Margot. Brat claimed he found it while cleaning the basement. He mentioned it had many items from the past and thought she might be interested. Margot excitedly opened the notebook. On the very first page, she saw a photograph of her mother. All at once, her surroundings changed. She saw her mother as a young woman, greeting Harold. They both seemed relaxed and even planned to meet in the darkroom after school. The librarian's voice pulled Margot back to the present. Margot remembered that this librarian had worked there for a long time. She asked where the darkroom was. The librarian thought for a moment before pointing her in the right direction. Margot entered the projection room and opened the notebook again. The scene changed again. This time, she saw her mother and Harold developing photos. Sarah was inviting Harold to meet her friends. He was hesitant at first but finally agreed. Suddenly, the door was thrown open and the strange vision vanished instantly. Frustrated, Margot left the darkroom. She went directly to her friends to tell them everything she had seen. She explained that all the secrets seemed to be inside the notebook. Soon after, the entire group went to the school theater. Margot guessed that if they visited the places mentioned in the notebook, they could see the memories connected to them. Isaiah argued that this plan was too risky. The strange things they had already been through still haunted them. Margot, however, was convinced this was their only chance to find out the truth. She ignored his concerns and opened the old notebook once more. In this vision, Harold looked tense. He was telling Sarah that someone was trying to harm him. him. When Sarah asked him for a name, he hesitated and wouldn't answer. Angrily, she shook his hand off and turned away from him. Margot thought the memory was over, but unexpectedly, Harold spun around and insisted that Sarah had to go with him. Instantly, Margot's friends knew something was wrong. Harold's eyes turned black and he sat without moving. James tried to take the notebook and opened it, revealing a scene of the mansion burning at night. She remembered Margot's recent theory. Perhaps they could only save their friend by going to that location. Margot's body had become stiff and she couldn't move. Her friends struggled to get her into the car. Inside the vision, the younger Sarah was being dragged by Harold toward the front of the burned-out villa. At that moment, Harold saw several figures appearing in the shadows. He quickly pressed the bell and then hid. Pale with fear, he ran to the basement, but the figures in black purposely made noises outside. He panicked so much that his legs gave out and he collapsed. Tragically, a fire then started. Margot found herself unexpectedly trapped in the fire. Luckily, Isaiah and the others arrived just in time. The group had barely sighed in relief when they saw 5 people in black coming out of the house, carrying boxes. When these people took off their masks, Isaiah and his friends were stunned. It was their own parents, but as young adults. They all looked tense, knowing that Harold's death was connected to them. They agreed to bury the secret, promising that no one would ever speak of it again. The image in the notebook faded. The friends were in disbelief. They felt their parents could not possibly be murderers. But Isabella suddenly had an idea. It seemed the cause of all the recent strange events was Harold, getting his revenge. Margot suspected there was more to the story that was still hidden. Isaiah was extremely curious about what was in the box their parents had taken from the house. Just then, Brad appeared, saying he would explain everything. Isaiah and the others, unable to hide their curiosity, followed him into the mansion. The teenagers sat in a line, listening with close attention. Brat then started to tell the story that had been buried for decades. Harold's grandfather, Ephraim, was an unsuccessful magician. His boring shows made it so hard to earn a living that he couldn't even pay his bills. Desperate, Ephraim used all his savings to buy a talking puppet from a fortune teller's shop. He then found a small slip of paper tucked into the puppet's clothing. Driven by curiosity, Ephraim read the words aloud. Instantly, the puppet's head turned on its own. From that point on, his show business career took off. Audiences believed Ephraim was a brilliant ventriloquist, but only he knew the truth. The puppet could actually speak. Yet, instead of being scared, he grew more and more dependent on the puppet, as Ephraim was now a famous star wherever he went. This lasted for 15 years, after which his fame began to fade. The ticket manager suggested he switch to a new puppet, as audiences were getting tired of the act. Unexpectedly, the puppet itself spoke, saying, "Deal with him." Ephraim, falling into a trance, stood up and recited a magic spell. The manager instantly turned into a stone statue. After this, the puppet grew even more evil. It taught Ephraim more powerful spells, even forcing him to set a building on fire. Ephraim eventually snapped out of it, realizing he had been completely under the puppet's spell. To escape its influence, he bought a villa in the countryside. Once there, he sealed the box holding the terrifying puppet inside a wall, planning for it to be there forever. He passed away a few years later. Harold's parents inherited this very house. Because Harold had been badly bullied at his old school, the family chose to move to this town for a new start. The living room was full of antiques. Harold's attention was immediately drawn to a human-like mask in a glass cabinet. Harold's father was worried his son might have trouble making friends at the new school. To help, he bought him a camera and suggested he join the school's photography club. He hoped this would allow Harold to fit in more easily. This plan worked. On his first day, Harold managed to connect with girls like Sarah and Nora thanks to his camera. Unfortunately, Harold was naturally a loner. He kept refusing Sarah's invitations to parties, choosing to stay home and deal with his anxiety. His father encouraged his son to be more open-minded, reminding him that the kids here weren't like the ones back home. Harold knew this but was still unable to get over his deep-seated fears. During a fit of anger, he threw a flashlight against the wall. By pure coincidence, this action revealed the magic puppet sealed inside. Harold believed this was a gift for him. He happily showed it to his parents, who both felt the object was very strange. While organizing his things, he happened to find a card in the puppet's pocket. When Harold read the spell written on it, the puppet instantly came to life. The events happened exactly as they had in his grandfather's story. After that, Harold's performances at school were met with praise from everyone. Being an introverted person, he grew more and more dependent on the puppet. Harold, however, was luckier than his grandfather. He was surrounded by friends and family who truly loved and cared for him. His parents were the first to notice a change in their son after the puppet's arrival. Harold became easily angered and even got into arguments with his mother. His father decided to burn the puppet, but as he tried, the fire only grew stronger, leaving the wooden puppet completely unharmed. Harold was on his way to school when something made him turn back home. home. Just as he arrived, he saw the fire, and his expression turned fierce and strange. At that moment, a strange whispering sound came from the puppet. Harold immediately said the spell, and in an instant, his parents were turned into two lifeless puppets. Harold's classmates also began to notice his recent strange behavior. Nora even overheard the puppet mumbling to itself. She quickly told Sarah about it, but Sarah thought the idea was ridiculous. They changed their minds during a school party one evening when Harold, with the puppet, acted strangely. He began openly telling the private secrets of Sarah and her friends. It was then that everyone realized something was seriously wrong. Harold's change was clearly connected to the puppet. Ben suggested that they had to destroy it, and the group quickly agreed. That night, they snuck into Harold's house. When Harold opened the front door for a moment, Ben was the first one to slip inside. He found the puppet quickly, but it suddenly said a spell that made the room shake violently. The lights flickered and then went out. Ben managed to stay calm, placed the puppet into a wooden box, and escaped with it. At the same time, Harold was hiding down in the basement. The group of friends, having seen the puppet's strange power, stood outside, yelling for Harold to come out. But in his panic, Harold slipped and fell down the stairs, and the basement burst into flames. Knowing Harold couldn't have survived, they aimed all their anger at the puppet. After some discussion, the group decided to hide what had happened. They took the puppet to an abandoned mine, buried it, and sealed it away forever. That was the true story of the past. Isaiah and the others finally felt a sense of relief. Their parents were not murderers after all. They had only been trying to free Harold from the puppet's control. But Brat suddenly became angry. He insisted that their parents were the ones to blame because their biggest mistake was letting Harold be with the puppet for so long. Before anyone could recover from the shock, flames burst from Brat's body. He declared that this was only the beginning and then vanished. Panicked, Isaiah and the others tried to run from the old mansion. But when they opened the front door, they found a bottomless pit in front of them. They calmed themselves and tried again, but the result was the same. Margot was the most certain at this point, insisting they were all trapped inside the death diary. Their only hope was that their parents would find them in time. However, in the real world, the teens were all sitting motionless inside the mansion. Brat took their phones and, using face recognition, unlocked each one. He then sent messages to their parents, claiming something had come up and their children wouldn't be home that night. The group's only way to get help was now completely cut off. Nora was convinced Harold's ghost had returned. Unwilling to do nothing, she stopped taking the medicine from the hospital, and her mind became much clearer. She went to Isabella's mother and demanded to be let out so she could save her child, threatening to file a complaint with the hospital if she didn't. The first thing Nora did when she got home was to get the talking puppet. Harold had previously sent James's clone to the abandoned mine to find it, but it was already gone. It turned out Nora had secretly taken the puppet home with her before. Her ex-lover, Colin, asked why she seemed so tense, but Nora couldn't explain. She firmly took the puppet and drove off. Colin was certain Nora was hiding something and rushed to his high school friend Ben's house to ask what was going on. When he mentioned that Nora had left with a puppet, Ben's expression immediately grew dark. He stood up and left without a word, leaving Colin even more suspicious. Meanwhile, Nora was driving when she ignored a call from Sarah. A red car was following her, but she didn't notice. The group trapped in the diary space was still desperately trying to find a way out. They had already checked all the special items in the room, but there were no hidden buttons or passages. Suddenly, a noise came from the next room. They armed themselves and prepared for a fight. The person who came out was Brat, the one who had trapped them. After a long explanation, Isaiah's group slowly began to understand. The man before them was just Brat's soul. His physical body had been taken over by Harold. He had been trapped in this space for days and, despite trying everything, could not escape. At that moment, Isabella noticed a ray of light coming from outside a door. She quieted everyone and they looked below. A new room had appeared beneath them. They figured this must be the way out. They immediately tore up curtains, tying them together to make a rope. As the lightest, Isabella was chosen to go down and check. She tied the rope securely around her waist, gave a signal, and slowly went down. Fortunately, the distance wasn't far, and she soon reached the source of the light. The place looked like their parents' high school. She walked past Harold's old locker and entered a large auditorium, which was creepily filled with motionless statues. Panicked, Isabella turned to run and signaled for her friends to pull her up. At the same time, in the real world, the person following Nora was Brat. While chewing gum, he accidentally tore a page from the diary. Instantly, the room Isabella was in began to collapse violently. Luckily, her friends managed to pull her to safety. In his own panic, the real Brat hit his head against the car window, making his consciousness temporarily return to his body. Harold's spirit, however, soon took back control. When Brat's soul returned to the diary space, he excitedly shared what he had found. Margot quickly realized that if Brat's soul could return to reality, and mark an exit in the notebook, they could all escape. In the real world, Isaiah's father, Ben, and James's mother drove to the abandoned mine. Ben rappelled to the bottom and confirmed the puppet was gone. Suddenly, a voice sounded behind him. He turned to see another of James's clones, which immediately untied the rope, trapping Ben in the mine. The clone then went to find James's mother, who was waiting outside. Ignoring her confused expression, it bent down to pick up a wooden stick, preparing to hit her. Just in time, Ben broke free and rushed forward. The mother didn't hesitate. She swung the stick and shattered the clone's head, sending liquid splashing everywhere. Finally, they both believed Nora's warning. Harold's soul had truly returned for revenge. Meanwhile, Isaiah's group began to carry out their escape plan. When Brat's soul was jolted back to his real body by a strong punch, he tried to grab the diary but lost control of his hands. The two souls fought for control of the body, causing the notebook to be thrown from the car and land in a puddle. Inside the diary space, the group felt the change immediately. Water began to pour into the room, and they were soon in danger of a rising flood. As it fell, the diary flipped to a new page, and the group was instantly sent to that location, a basement. While they were still confused, a white hand reached out. The figures who appeared were Harold's parents. After being turned into puppets, they had stayed in this place, waiting for their son to return so they could all leave together. In the real world, Brat's soul was fighting to get control back from Harold. Fortunately, his will was stronger. Brat held his out-of-control arm steady, while his other hand began to draw an escape route in the diary. Soon, an exit appeared in the basement. As the group was about to leave, the puppet father spoke, saying they had already forgiven Harold. At that moment, Isaiah's group was pulled back to the real world. They didn't hesitate and scrambled out of the old mansion. Brat was laughing, having just finished the escape route, when a sharp pain shot through his head, and his soul was sent back into the notebook. He breathed a sigh of relief, knowing Isaiah's group was safe. However, Brat's body was still possessed by Harold, whose greatest wish now was to find Nora and get back his beloved demon puppet. Of course, Nora wouldn't let him succeed. She had driven to a remote place with the puppet, planning to find a place to bury it after a short rest in a wooden cabin. Unexpectedly, as she opened the door, a policeman was standing there, warning her that a blizzard was coming and she should leave before the roads were blocked. Nora's quick nod made the policeman suspicious, especially when he saw a human-shaped cloth bag on the table. Nora quickly explained it was just a doll, not a body, which seemed to calm his worry. He reminded her to be careful and left. Not long after, Brat followed the trail halfway up the mountain, but was stopped by the police because of the storm. The road was now closed to traffic going up. He angrily turned around, but instead of giving up, he parked his car at the bottom of the mountain and began to climb on foot. Meanwhile, Nora was furious. If the doll could be burned or chopped up, she wouldn't be in this mess. She packed her things, but as she stepped outside, she saw Brat approaching. Nora immediately tried to drive away, but her car wouldn't start. Brat rushed over and punched the window just as the car roared to life. A sharp turn threw him off, but the engine died again. Nora had to leave the car and run. Luckily, the person chasing her had an injured leg and moved slowly. The two began a chase through the snowy mountains. After hearing from Brat's spirit that Harold was after Nora, Isaiah's group immediately guessed it was about the puppet and drove after them. At the base of the mountain, they found Brat's parked car and a set of footprints leading up the slope. Lucas was the most frantic, fearing for his mother's safety, and he ran up the mountain without a second thought. The others, just as worried, followed him, while Isabella and James stayed at the bottom to provide support. When Lucas and the other two reached the cabin, they found a chaotic scene, which only made them more panicked. They immediately followed the tracks into the forest. At this point, Nora was exhausted. She had just managed to escape Brat when he suddenly jumped out at her again. Despite his injury, he fought hard. Nora broke free once more and ran, but after only a few steps, she heard a voice call out "Mommy" through the white snow. She was overjoyed, thinking Lucas had come to save her. But as she got closer, she realized it was just Brat copying his voice. This time, she had no strength left to run. As he snatched her backpack, Nora fell into a deep pile of snow and passed out. He excitedly pulled the puppet from the bag. After so many years, the two old friends were finally together again. Just as Lucas and the others followed the trail to that spot, Isaiah, who was last in line, accidentally slipped and fell down a cliff without a sound. It took the others a while to realize he was gone. Lucas couldn't worry about his friend now. He turned and pushed forward. Finally, he found his mother unconscious in the deep snow. Fortunately, she wasn't seriously injured. Seeing her son had come for her, she was moved to tears. Isaiah had fallen into a deep ravine but had managed to grab onto a vine. The cold wind whipped around him, making it incredibly hard to climb. Meanwhile, the parents of the teens had also figured out Nora's location. On their way to the cabin, they met Isabella and James. The two groups shared information and headed up the mountain together. Poor Isaiah was still fighting for his life. After a huge effort, he finally pulled himself over the edge of the cliff, but as he looked up, he saw Brat waiting for him with the puppet. He picked up a rock, preparing to finish Isaiah. Just then, Lucas rushed in to help, but he was quickly overpowered by Brat. Nora tried to appeal to Harold's feelings, hoping to reason with him, but one word from the puppet was all it took for Brat's face to turn vicious again. Margot suddenly shouted the words Harold's parents had said before they disappeared. At this time, the other parents also arrived. Sarah, who had been closest to Harold, stepped forward to reason with him. She explained that they had snuck into the old house that night to take the puppet so that Harold wouldn't be caught and blamed. Margot added that his parents never held anything against him. They were always waiting for him to come back. Brat's expression turned sad. He thought for a long time, then suddenly turned and bent down to pull Isaiah up. The puppet beside him continued to whisper temptations, but Brat immediately threw it into the abyss. He had finally come to his senses, realizing the doll was the true demon that tricked people. Harold's soul immediately left Brat's body. Seeing his old best friend, he remembered the beautiful memories of their past. The anger that had covered his spirit slowly faded. The shapes of his parents appeared in the distance. Harold walked over to them silently, and the family embraced before slowly disappearing. Poor Brat had also woken up, his soul finally back in his own body. Everyone looked down into the bottomless pit. The evil spirit that had haunted the town for so many years was finally gone. However, at the bottom of the cliff, the shattered Slappy opened his eyes again, showing that something suspicious was still happening. The story then flashes back to several months before, when Brat was working as a teacher in Portland. He felt unappreciated and faced many complaints from students, which eventually got him fired by the principal. To make things worse, his landlord came to firmly demand the rent. After begging, Brat was given only a 3-day extension. Things got even worse when his beloved dog was hit and killed by a car. Just as Brat felt all hope was lost, a real estate agency contacted him with the news that he had inherited his great-grandfather's estate. This inheritance set the stage for the many unexpected events that followed. Luckily, Brat now had both a home and a job, giving him a chance to live in peace. He planned to write a novel based on his recent experiences, fulfilling his lifelong dream of becoming an author. Brat wrote a story that ended with the 5 brave teenagers returning to their normal lives. In this version, Isaiah, the baseball player, was doing physical therapy with his father, hoping to get back to his best form. However, after going through so many scary events, Isaiah was secretly rethinking if he wanted to keep playing sports. As for James, he and Isabella had become close friends, though James's recent girlfriend troubles left Isabella feeling a bit abandoned. Meanwhile, Margot was finally moving on from her love for Isaiah and was slowly accepting Lucas's affection. Everything seemed perfect in the book, but this was just the ending Brat had imagined. Reality was going to be different. For example, Margot was seriously thinking about moving to Seattle with her mother. Soon after, the publishers contacted Brat. They liked the story but felt the ending needed more excitement. They suggested he explore the history of the puppet Slappy more to make readers want more, possibly starting a whole book series. Brat was excited by the chance, but without real events to guide him, he struggled to write a creative ending. Looking for ideas, he decided to go for a drive. He drove without a destination along the main road until he found himself heading toward Seymour Mountain, the exact place where he had thrown away the puppet. A terrible idea came into Brat's mind, pushing him to go into the mountains to search for the doll. There it was. He finally found the lone puppet lying on the ground. Blinded by his wish for success, Brat actually brought Slappy back home. He found a piece of paper hidden inside the puppet's clothing, took a deep breath, and read the spell aloud. At first, the puppet didn't react, and Brat laughed at himself. However, the moment he turned his back, Slappy put himself back together and came back to life. Slappy declared that he would now give Brat the greatest ending ever written. As soon as those words were spoken, the stuffed dog on the wall miraculously came to life. The living pet led Brat into the woods, signaling for him to dig at a specific spot. Brat wanted to make a joke about the situation, but the creature suddenly showed its teeth and let out a fierce growl. Meanwhile, Isaiah and the others planned to drive Margot to Seattle for the weekend, turning the trip into a final road adventure. Lucas stayed sad throughout the trip. The group of 5 quickly arrived in Seattle, where Sarah helped the kids rent a large house to make sure they had a fun weekend. Isabella wanted to buy ice cream at a corner shop and pulled James and Lucas along with her, leaving Isaiah and Margot alone at the house. This created an awkward mood. Isaiah asked if she had really made up her mind about moving to Seattle. Margot said she wanted a fresh start, especially since her father was building a new family. The only thing she couldn't bear to let go of was Lucas. The next day, Margot and Lucas went out to buy donuts. She wanted to have a serious talk with him, but it became clear that their plans for the future were completely opposite. Margot wanted the busy city life, while Lucas only wanted to take over his mother's harbor shop after graduation. They simply weren't on the same path. That evening, Margot took everyone to her cousin's party. Lucas, surrounded by strangers, found himself missing the comfort of his hometown more than ever. He loved his life there and couldn't lie to Margot about his feelings. feelings. Their disagreement turned into a huge argument, and Lucas left the party alone. When Margot and the others eventually returned to the rental house, they found he hadn't come back, finding only a note on the table full of apologies. Back in the woods, Brat dug up a coffin from the dirt. Following Slappy's orders, he read a specific spell. Visions of a massive fire flashed through his mind, and the moment the spell was finished, the puppet lost its magic powers as its true spirit entered the coffin. A thin corpse came out, which quickly turned into a healthy human form. Just then, Isaiah's father arrived looking for Brat. With a simple wave of his hand, the mysterious man, whose name was Kandu, turned him into a puppet. Back in 1879, Kandu had been an ordinary soldier who was shot in the stomach and knocked down by cannon fire. By luck, he stumbled into an underground space while holding his wound. Kandu stood up and suddenly smelled kerosene. He quickly used his lighter to light it, revealing a stone wall covered in many spells and a carving that looked like a high tower. At that moment, one of the lines of the spell shone with a golden light. Kandu tried to read it aloud, and in the next second, his gunshot wound healed perfectly. Kandu immediately wrote down all the spells with a pen and paper. In 1885, he arrived at a carnival in New York and entered a doll shop. The shopkeeper recognized him as a famous magician, a title Kandu hated. With a casual wave, he brought a wooden puppet to life to show the shopkeeper what real magic looked like. Kandu declared that he would turn this quiet carnival into the liveliest place on earth, but the shopkeeper had to help him build a wooden tower. A year later, the carnival was doing great, but the shopkeeper noticed something was wrong with Kandu. He was turning the audience into puppets and spoke of doing a dark ritual. Realizing things couldn't go on this way, the shopkeeper, who had learned a few spells over the year, helped create Slappy to distract Kandu. While Kandu was admiring the work, the shopkeeper tried to turn him into a puppet. However, Kandu stabbed the shopkeeper in the stomach. With his last breath, the shopkeeper read a spell to trap Kandu inside Slappy's body. Now, with Kandu free from the puppet, he was determined to finish the ritual he had started years ago, to turn 1,000 living people into puppets, place them on the tower, and burn them as a sacrifice. At this moment, Lucas returned to his home only to find his father, who was supposed to be dead, standing there alive and well. Frozen in shock, his father explained that he had been a key witness in a murder case and had faked his death to help the police. Lucas struggled to believe this until his mother confirmed his father's story. However, just as he wanted to hug his father, he was turned into a puppet by Kandu, who had pretended to be his father while controlling Lucas's mother to act out the whole thing. Soon, the other friends experienced similar tricks. Isaiah had just returned home when he was greeted by a coach from the University of Washington, offering him a full scholarship to join their team. With his parents watching eagerly, Isaiah felt forced to take the pen and sign. However, he suddenly noticed a scar on his wrist was missing and realized something was wrong. Meanwhile, James was stopped by the girl of his dreams confessing her love, and Margot discovered her separated parents getting back together, almost crying tears of joy. Fortunately, Isaiah arrived in time to warn Margot that it was all a fake illusion. As soon as he spoke, Kandu showed his true form, and Margot's father was revealed to have been turned into a puppet. Isaiah and Margot hurriedly ran away, just as James and Isabella arrived by car. Having seen through Kandu's trick, Isabella explained that she knew something was wrong the moment she got home, and her mother greeted her in an unusually warm way. Now, the four of them planned to meet up with Lucas, but found his house empty. As they were frantically searching, Lucas zoomed past on a motorcycle. They quickly jumped into the car to follow him. They chased him into the night before finally catching up. To their horror, they discovered that Lucas had already been turned into a puppet. Just then, their controlled parents arrived at the scene and captured the children, taking them to the square near the high tower. All the townspeople, except for the 4 teenagers and Brat, had been turned into puppets. At that moment, Kandu appeared, transporting them back to the old battlefield and standing before the wall full of writing. He declared his plan to complete the sacrifice of 1,000 souls to open the gates of hell, reshape the world, and create a home without war. Kandu left Brat with an order to kill the teenagers, then left the tent. The pet dog, hearing its master's command, immediately got ready to attack. Brat had not expected things to go this far. He quietly took the pen from the table and destroyed the pet dog's illusion. Brat decided he had to stop Kandu, save the villagers, and make up for his mistakes. Brat did have a way to stop the ritual. It turned out his great-grandfather was the puppet shopkeeper from the past, who had left behind a pen with the solution recorded inside it. The scene shifts to Kandu about to light the tower and burn the puppet people inside. Unexpectedly, the shopkeeper came out of the tent, declaring that the children's spell had brought him back to life. Just when everyone hoped for the shopkeeper's magic to save them, he suddenly changed his tune, telling Kandu that his past fight was just short-sighted, and now they could work together to build a perfect world. The shopkeeper shopkeeper then took the torch and lit the wood beneath the tower. Kandu watched the flames with a smile, but in the next second, he turned into a puppet. It turned out it was all a trick created by a spell. The shopkeeper was actually Brat in disguise. Everyone quickly searched for the spell to turn the villagers back to normal, but Kandu suddenly returned to normal. Isaiah, holding the spell book, warned him that if he made a move, he'd burn the book. Kandu didn't care because he knew the spell by heart. He slowly approached the tower, and a black fog covered the teenagers. Isaiah found that the spell book could push away the fog. He broke free, passed the book to Margot, and then jumped at Kandu to buy them time. Margot frantically searched the spell book and finally found the restoration spell. All magic instantly disappeared, and Kandu went back to his wounded form from 1879. Suddenly, the souls he had wronged reached out from underground to drag Kandu back to hell. In his panic, he pulled out a gun and began shooting, nearly hitting Margot, but Isaiah quickly stepped in to take the bullet, using his strong muscles to protect her. Eventually, Kandu was dragged into hell to serve Satan, and the villagers returned to normal, except for Isaiah, who remained unconscious from the gunshot wound. A sad Margot sat outside his hospital room, willing to pay any price to wake Isaiah up. She read a spell from the book to call him back. However, the story suddenly ends with a twist. Brat is shown being once again possessed by the evil Kandu. That's where Season 1 ends. If you want more, Season 2 is also out and I can recap that too. Just let me know in the comments. Like and subscribe, and most importantly, hype this video.